Okay, let's talk about calculators and how much you should depend upon your calculator when you're trying to learn math. Basically, I've seen both extremes. I've seen students where they'll always use their calculator for every single math problem. And unfortunately, they do not try to learn the math. They try to take shortcuts using their calculator. Then I've seen the opposite extreme as well, where students will be like, oh, no. If I use my calculator, that kind of means that I don't understand math and I should always do stuff by hand, pencil and paper. Well, both extremes are not good. You need to kind of know when it's appropriate to use a calculator and when it's not. Okay, so I want to kind of talk about some of those things. So if you've been if the topic of this video caught your eye and you're like, I really don't know when I should use my calculator, when I should or when I shouldn't in terms of my ability or what's best for me when I'm learning math, well, hopefully this little video will help you out. So we get into this in just one second. But first, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John. I'm the founder of TabletClass Math. I'm also a middle and high school math teacher. I'm going to leave a link to my math help program in the description of this video. But basically, I have 100 plus different math courses ranging from pre-algebra to pre-calculus and everything in between. So if you are at the middle school, high school, or even college level in terms of mathematics, I can help you excel in your math course. Now, if you're going to be taking any test that has math on it, I'm talking about things like the GED, SAT, ACT, GRE, GMAT, ASVAB, Accuplacer, CLEP exam, ALEX exam, teacher certification exam, and the course exam. You get the idea. I can help you prepare and pass those exams. Now, if you homeschool, you definitely have to check out my homeschool math program. Very comprehensive. I think you'll really like what you see. And if you don't have any math notes, don't panic. Well, don't panic just yet. Okay, I'll tell you a reason why I'm saying don't panic just yet. But anyways, I'm going to leave links to my math notes in the description of this video. But I've been teaching math for decades, and I'll tell you, the one thing that students don't understand enough, unfortunately, is that the secret to doing great in math is having great math notes. So if you focus on taking great math notes, believe me, you're going to have great math grades. And if you kind of blow this off, you're going to have poor math grades. Okay, so you don't want to have these, you want to have these. All right, so before we get going, I'm just kind of curious for some of you out there that are watching this video that want to answer this, go ahead and put in the comment section, when do you think you should not use a calculator? When do you think you should not use a calculator? Because we probably have a ton of reasons when you should use a calculator, but if you want to answer that as well, hey, when do you think you should use a calculator and when should you not use a calculator when you're trying to learn math? All right, so let's get into this now. Now, before I leave this image, because we're looking at a lovely scientific calculator, for those of you that are watching this video that are, maybe in your 60s or definitely over your 50s, I'm in my 50s when I'm making this video right now. When you could think back to, when we're learning arithmetic. So for me, that was like the 1970s when I was at elementary school, and I have fond memories of my first grade teacher smoking in the classroom, or at least right kind of outside the classroom. So those were the good old days for sure. But anyways, what I'm getting across to you is that we didn't have calculators. So calculators did exist, but they were mostly for like engineers. You certainly weren't using them in school at that time, for sure. Okay, and of course this has changed. So as technology has become more available, everyone's experience is going to be a little bit different. So, so some of us that are older, we didn't even have a chance to use a calculator until maybe like in high school. Of course, in the 1980s, you started seeing calculators, and then from the 80s beyond, their calculators are kind of everywhere, right? So even in today's, time, elementary school students will have a calculator, not a scientific calculator, but some sort of basic calculator. So we're going to kind of discuss all of that, but all of this may depend upon where your perspective, your age perspective. But let's just try to clear some things up. All right, so when should you use a calculator? Well, if you have like a lot, okay, and I'm talking about some big calculations to do, all right, you want to use a calculator. So if you're trying to figure out 342.06 divided by 1,562.091, yes, it's important that you know how to do this by hand, but you want to use a calculator as a tool. Okay, this would be a good example of using a calculator. You don't want to be like, oh no, I must always continue to practice how to divide decimals and division, and not use my calculator. No, you want to save time. Your calculator is a tool. Okay, so if you're faced with big calculations, use your calculator to save time and get accurate answers. Okay, that's a common, or again, common sense. Okay, so don't feel compelled that you always have to do something like this by hand. A lot of you will be like, hey, of course, I'm going to always use a calculator with a problem like this. But believe me, when I've been teaching for a long time, there are some students that think they're almost kind of guilty about using your calculator. Do not be guilty about using your calculator. So that's one example. We'll kind of go back and forth between when we should use a calculator and when we should not use a calculator. Now, you don't want to use a calculator when you are dealing with fractions. So for example, if I'm trying to figure out with 1/7, or let's do something here, 1/3 x plus 1/4 is equal to 2/7. The worst thing that you can do, and I've seen this uh, pretty frequently teaching algebra, is that some students will be like, oh, I don't know how to deal with fractions. I forgot how to deal with them, but I got my lovely calculator here, and so I'm going to go ahead and turn these fractions into decimals. So I'll get my calculator out, and then I'll turn this 1/3 into zero point 0.3. Of course, that's zero point 0.3 repeating. In other words, it's 0.33333. So I'll just use 1/3 or maybe 2/3, depending on how I feel that day. And then 1/4 will be 0.27, and then I take 2 divided by 7, I get that decimal. And then I just do this algebra problem using decimal equivalents. However, here's the problem with this, okay? You're going to get estimates. You're not going to exactly always get the exact precise answer. So you do not use a calculator to, especially with fractions. This is probably one of the most obvious times where I see students who'll be like, oh, I'm going to get my calculator because I don't want to deal with fractions. So you do not want to use your calculator to change fractions into decimals. You need to understand how to work with fractions. So this is a real, I think, kind of one of the real big times where I've seen people use calculators inappropriately. Now, so those are two examples, all right? Let's see if I can think of any more. When should you use a calculator? Well, again, mostly it's when you're dealing with big calculations, okay? Also, and this kind of goes into when you study more advanced math, when you need to special functions, all right? So special functions. So when you need things like the tangent button, if you're not familiar with the tangent, or sine, or cosine. I'm going to show you a calculator in a second, or logarithms. Way back in the good old days, back in the, well, I would say 1980s and prior to that. So let's say you're 60, 70, 80 years old. You may recall way back in the 1970s, 1960s when you went to school, and I saw this in the 80s, at the back of textbooks, there were tables, okay? And I do not see this anymore for sure, but those tables were, you can look up information that basically your calculator is going to be able to tell you. So like the tangent of angles or the logarithms, whatnot, you would go to the back of your textbook and use that because calculators were still, kind of novel back, especially like in the 80s. Again, and there was the personal calculator in the 70s, but those were very expensive back in those days, and mostly people like engineers or people at the college level kind of had them. Certainly not at the high school level. That wasn't a common thing. So we used tables in the back of the book, but now we have all that information in our calculator. So you're not going to have tables to reference. So this is another good example of when you want to use your calculator. Okay. Now, when don't you want to use your calculator? Well, these type of problems right here, okay, and this is stuff like you're going to see in more, I would say, beyond algebra, when you're studying algebra 1, algebra 2, you can start getting into trigonometry and things like that, or even, let's say, algebra 2 level, okay, depending on where you're at, you might be interested in these topics here if you haven't studied them yet. But just know that there comes a time where you have these special functions where we need our calculator, but we also can solve a lot of problems like in trigonometry. Okay, well, that's a terrible little XY graph. There's a lot of problems that we can solve with like right angles and logarithms and whatnot. You don't have to run to your calculator. Matter of fact, it's pretty common, very common, matter of fact, where your teacher will give you your test, and there'll be two parts. The first part will be with your calculator, and then the second part will be no calculator, and you'll be doing topics, trigonometry, logarithms, and whatnot. So you need to know how to handle special functions without a calculator as well. So there's really, you got to know how to use your calculator, and then you need to know how to solve problems. And there's only certain types of problems that you can do without your calculator. But believe me when I tell you, you're going to see tests. It's pretty common where there's a calculator section and a no calculator section. So this is a good example of when you need your calculator and some type of problems where you don't have to use your calculator. So anyways, but here's the thing. It's kind of keep it big picture here. You want to know how to use your calculator, okay? It's important that you know how to use this tool, all right? So you should be practicing it when you're dealing with a lot of big calculations. But when you're dealing with a lot of big calculations, you also have to keep in mind the order of operations, so like PEMDAS and things like that. So even when you're using your calculator for special functions or trying to do some calculations, you still need to understand the math. You need to be able to talk and to communicate with your calculator. So let's go down and take a look at a basic scientific calculator. Now this thing would be like a supercomputer way back in the good old 1960s, 1970s. I mean, this right here, this scientific calculator probably can get something like this literally for maybe like 20 bucks at the Walmart, CVS, something like that. Of course, this is a scientific calculator, and it's scientific because you can see it's more than just basic numbers and basic operations. We have some of these nice things here, SIN, COS, TAN. This is trigonometry functions, and then you have LN and log. This is logarithmic functions, and there's a lot of other stuff going on here. This is a pretty sophisticated calculator. Now, as you kind of graduate into more advanced courses, namely, I would say algebra 2, pre-calculus, maybe college algebra for sure, these type of courses, you're going to want to have another type of calculator. That's called a graphing calculator. So in your window here in a graphing calculator, it's actually like a window where you can actually see graphs and things like that. And that's almost a requirement for some of these courses. So if you're going to continue on, it's okay to invest maybe 20 bucks in a scientific calculator at the middle school level. You don't need something like this at the elementary level, but as this is more like, again, like in the middle school level mathematics, maybe get up to like algebra 1. But as soon as you start really getting into graphing functions and things like that, then you're going to want to pick up a graphing calculator. So examples of those would be like a TI-83, TI-84. Those are excellent calculators. I have both of those. And again, these calculators have been out for, at least the TI-83 has been out for 15, 20, maybe 20 years for the time of this video. But it's very, very, these calculators are like just full-on computers. But your ability to use a calculator as a tool, especially in graphic calculators, are extremely important. And this is where math has changed. Way back again, 40 years ago when you were studying this stuff, you didn't have a calculator to use as a tool to understand mathematics. So, the one thing you have to understand is when you do have a calculator, you need to learn how to use it, okay? And you don't have to learn how to use everything, but you need to know how to properly use your calculator. So these are some of those special functions that I was talking about, logarithm, ln, and then right here, you have functions that have to deal with fractions like mixed number fractions, how to convert fractions to decimals and things like that. So you don't always want to use that, but here's a really important set of buttons on your calculator that you got to be careful of, really mindful of, is the parentheses, the brackets, okay? These are grouping symbols, and this is going to help you type in correctly into your calculator so you can really be certain that you have the correct order of operations set up, that entire structure. Now, I can't cover everything here, but the only way you're going to know that you're getting better at using a calculator, kind of stumbled on getting that out, is you're going to have to, look at problems that are already solved, right? Calculate, like, hey, here's a calculation that you're going to do. It requires all these steps, but you know the right answer, okay? You're going to have to know how to communicate with your calculator, how to use it, okay? And this is a skill, and this is why it's important that you get to know you get your directions out and get to know these basic functions. But some of these are fairly universal, so let's just kind of highlight a couple universal things. So all graphic calculators are going to, so most of them by design are already going to by default use the proper order of operations. There's we can kind of get into some really off topic. We are talking about calculators, but how calculators, their logic and whatnot, there's a couple of different things, but most of the calculators you're going to be dealing with are going to use the proper order of operations that you know, but you still want to communicate by using grouping symbols, etc. But here, for example, this button, this is a pretty common symbol. If you look there, it's an upside down V. Okay, now what is that? Well, this is, and let me go and erase this. This is how we take a power to something. So if I want to know what 2 to the 5th power is, I would use this symbol. Now, how would you know that? Okay, if you didn't know about your calculator, it would be 2. You would type in 2, and then you would hit that little, we call that a caret, and then 5. Okay, so this would give us 2 to the 5th power. So this is how you express an exponent in a calculator. Okay, so again, little features like that that are pretty, common on most all calculators. But if you look here, right down here, this HYP, this is like hyperbolic functions. You're not going to see this unless you're in really advanced mathematics. Okay, so you don't need to know everything. You don't have to be a total expert in every single function in your calculator, but the main ones you definitely are going to need to know. But let's just take a look at something like this real quick, and let's do this here. 2 to the 5th divided by no 2 to the 5/3 power. Okay, this is going to be a really great illustration of what I'm talking about, how to use your calculator appropriately. So 2 to the 5, if I said go ahead and tell me what 2 to the 5/3 power is, I want you to go ahead and imagine what I just showed you here. How would you type this in? Okay, how would you type this in to get the right answer here? Okay, of course you're going to be using this function, okay, that caret key I just told you about. So some of you would be like, all right, this is going to be 2. Okay, there's the caret key, the power, and then 5, and then I would hit the division right there, right? 5 divided by 3. Okay, so how many of you out there think that this is correct? Okay. Well, if you think that is correct, unfortunately, I have to give you a little sad face. This is not correct. This is not correct. So you're like, what are you talking about? Well, I'm going to show you right now. Okay. What you just typed into your calculator is 2 to the 5th power divided by 3. That's what you just typed in. Okay. So if you want to know what 2 to the 5th power divided by 3 is, you type it in this way. Okay. So again, order of operations, you're going to do powers before division. Okay, you're like, oh, okay. So how can we fix this up to get this correct? Well, you want to put grouping symbols around that exponent. So it's going to be 2 to the, very explicitly use these grouping symbols, these parentheses, to the 5/3. Okay, so if you type this in, 2 caret 5/3, you'll get the right answer. Okay, so if you understood that, then I must give you your happy face and a few check marks and a couple stars so you can feel extra special. But again, this whole thing with calculators is you don't want to try to cheat learning math by you always running to your calculator, okay, especially with things with fractions and whatnot. You have to learn the math, and you also need to understand there's going to be times where you are not going to be allowed to use your calculator. So that's why you got to be paying attention in class. So it's a balance, okay, like everything else, it's a balance. But these calculators today are truly amazing, okay. I'm especially like the graphing calculators. You can, I mean, literally do just so much math, and they're far beyond what I ever could have imagined in high school. Okay, but even though, like again, like the TI-83, if you are in a market, by the way, if you're like, okay, I need to get a graphing calculator, you could probably get a used Well, a new TI-83 will probably be around $100. You get into TI-84 plus, that's going to be much more expensive. But if you're going to take, you have to check with your teacher. But some courses like statistics, or something like AP statistics may require you to have a specific type of calculator. So before you do purchase a graphing calculator, more expensive calculator, you check with the teacher or check with if you're going to be taking a certain course, try to see, hey, if there's a specific type of calculator that's going to be required, because you don't want to buy TI-83 and then find out they really, at a minimum want you to have a TI-84. So just considerations on this. But if you don't have to have any specific, you know, um, requirement for a particular level of graphing calculator, I would say just go with the TI-83. These have been out forever, and you probably can find a used one for much cheaper. Okay, I have calculators that are 20 plus years old. I just throw some AAA batteries in there, and they're good to go. They're maybe not as fancy as my TI-84, but they do and they get the job done. So that's all you really need, unless you have a specific reason to have something more advanced. And if you're going off to college, you're going to be an engineering major or whatnot, then you certainly want to invest in a graphic calculator that's going to be the best. Definitely like a TI-84 plus or beyond. All right, so hopefully this little conversation about calculators gave you some information, or kind of at least settled you down in terms of, hey, okay, I'm using the calculator correctly. I'm not overly dependent upon it. I'm not trying to cheat the system. But the bottom line is this, when it comes to math, you know, good old pencil and paper, that's where you want to start. Okay, again, a calculator is a tool. It's a calculating tool. All right. So if I was able to express that and you understand that, then, go ahead and give this video a like button if you feel it justifies it. And also, if you're new to my YouTube channel, hopefully you consider subscribing. Although I didn't teach any math here, my goal is to try to teach math, or just speak about everything math related in a clear, understandable way. I've been teaching math for decades. This is what I do. This is my passion. There's a lot of information that, it's stuck in my brain that I try to get out to you so you can be the best you can at mathematics. So hopefully you consider subscribing. I have well over 1,000 plus math videos on my channel, basic to advanced mathematics, and I'm posting new material all the time. But my best math help will always be within my math help program. Okay, so with that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.